Welcome, friends. Come on in and get comfortable. Whether you are curled beneath a blanket, resting against a familiar pillow, or simply allowing the last thoughts of the day to grow quieter, I am glad you are here. Perhaps the room around you is already dim, with only the soft light of a bedside lamp remaining. Perhaps the house has settled into that particular nighttime silence, when distant sounds seem softer than they did during the day, and even the passing minutes feel a little slower. There is nowhere you need to hurry tonight. The streets outside can continue without us for a while. The messages can wait, the doors can remain closed, and the world can become small enough to fit within the quiet space around your bed. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these journeys into the past, and let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is where you are. Then settle back, loosen your shoulders, and allow the evening to become still. Tonight, we are travelling not into a battlefield or a royal palace, but into another kind of kingdom, the great private mansion of America's Gilded Age. It is a world of carved staircases, velvet curtains, polished silver, imported carpets, servants moving quietly through hidden corridors, and women whose days appear effortless only because enormous amounts of work are being performed around them. Our story begins before the household is fully awake. Behind tall curtains in an upper bedroom, a millionaire's wife is beginning another carefully arranged day. She doesn't wake to an alarm clock ringing sharply beside the bed. In many wealthy households, waking itself is softened by servants and routine. The curtains may be opened gradually. A fire that has burned low overnight may be stirred back to life. Hot water is brought in. Depending on the household and the woman's preferences, a maid may enter quietly with tea, coffee, or a light tray. Exactly how early wealthy women rose varied considerably. No one can quite agree on a single typical schedule because surviving diaries describe households with very different habits. Some society women began their mornings relatively early, especially when children, charities, travel, or household business demanded attention. Others remained upstairs until late morning after evenings that had stretched well beyond midnight. For a woman who had attended a dinner, reception, or opera the night before, 9 o'clock might still feel decidedly early. Her bedroom is one of the most private rooms in a mansion designed largely for public display. Downstairs, visitors see marble, gilded mirrors, carved wood, elaborate ceilings, paintings, and carefully chosen furniture. Upstairs, life becomes slightly softer. There may be thick rugs muffling footsteps, upholstered chairs beside the fireplace, embroidered cushions, framed photographs, a writing desk, and perhaps a chaise longue positioned near a window. The bed itself might be surrounded by curtains or crowned with carved wood, depending on fashion. Heavy draperies help keep out drafts in winter, when even magnificent houses can possess stubborn cold corners despite furnaces, fireplaces, and steam heat. The first person she encounters is often not her husband but a servant. The maid entering the room understands routines that rarely need to be spoken aloud. She knows which curtains are opened first, where slippers are placed, what temperature the water should be, which robe her mistress prefers, and whether the morning begins with tea or breakfast. This quiet knowledge is part of the invisible machinery of wealth. A wealthy household depends upon people remembering hundreds of small details. The millionaire's wife may stretch, sit upright, and take a few moments over letters or newspapers brought upstairs. Personal correspondence can arrive in surprising quantities. There are invitations, family letters, notes from charitable committees, bills routed through household staff, messages from dressmakers, reminders of appointments, and the endless little communications required to maintain a social life. Breakfast is often simpler than the grand dinners associated with Gilded Age extravagance. She might eat eggs, toast, fruit, oatmeal, rolls, coffee, or tea. Some households favour a larger breakfast with fish, meat, or potatoes. But wealthy women are frequently encouraged by fashionable ideas about health and femininity to eat with restraint, especially in public. Diet advice circulates constantly during the period, much of it contradictory. Some physicians recommend hearty food and fresh air. Others warn women against overeating, excitement, excessive reading, too much exercise, too little exercise, tight clothing, cold rooms, hot rooms, and almost every other ordinary feature of existence. Patent medicines promise relief from nervousness, headaches, weak digestion, sleeplessness, and fatigue. A curious household remedy might involve smelling salts kept close at hand, usually compounds containing ammonia whose sharp odour is meant to revive someone feeling faint. Wealthy women are often depicted dramatically swooning in popular imagination, although historians continue to debate how common actual fainting was, compared with how frequently it appeared in fiction and humour. There are also tonics, mineral waters, digestive powders, and little bottles whose labels promise a suspiciously broad range of benefits. For now, however, the morning remains peaceful. Beyond the bedroom door, the mansion is already busy. Servants have been awake for hours. Coal has been carried, fires have been checked, floors have been swept, breakfast has been prepared. Deliveries may already be arriving at the service entrance. Somewhere below stairs, dishes knock gently against one another as they are arranged. A cook examines ingredients, a housemaid opens shutters, a footman prepares for errands. The lady of the house experiences the quiet surface of all this activity. That quiet is one of the greatest luxuries money can buy. She does not need to fetch water, light every fire, scrub a hearth, shake dust from carpets, or carry breakfast upstairs. Yet this does not mean her morning is entirely idle. Her day is governed by expectations. Before appearing downstairs, she must consider what appointments await her, who might call, what visits she owes, whether the household is receiving guests, what charitable work requires attention, what correspondence remains unanswered, and what clothing is suitable for each portion of the day. Clothing alone divides time into categories. Morning dress differs from calling dress. Walking clothes differ from carriage clothes. Afternoon garments differ from evening gowns. Morning introduces another complicated system entirely, with fabrics, colours, jewellery, and lengths of observance governed by custom. Even a quiet morning therefore carries a faint sense of preparation. She may sit beside the window while finishing her coffee, looking down toward a city street where horses pull delivery wagons through the cool air. Wheels pass over paving stones. A distant carriage turns a corner. Somewhere beyond the houses, factories and offices are already well into their working day. Inside the mansion, the bedroom remains warm and dim. The fire settles softly in the grate. A clock marks another quarter hour. Soon the maid will return, and the complicated transformation from private woman to public figure will begin. But for a few more minutes, she remains wrapped in the relative freedom of the morning, surrounded by letters, soft rugs, fading firelight, and the muffled activity of a household already moving carefully around her. Word count 4, 1050, and awaiting continue. The few quiet minutes of the morning do not last indefinitely. Before long, the bedroom door opens again, and the process of dressing begins. For a wealthy woman of the Gilded Age, getting dressed is not simply a matter of choosing a gown from a wardrobe and fastening a few buttons. It is a careful construction, built layer by layer, with fabrics, ribbons, hooks, pins, laces, and accessories combining to create the polished appearance expected of a woman occupying a visible place in fashionable society. Her maid begins with the garments closest to the body. A chemise, usually made of cotton or fine linen, forms one of the first layers. Over this come drawers and stockings, held in place with garters. Depending on the decade and the woman's preferences, additional undergarments help shape the silhouette that fashion requires. None of these pieces are meant to be seen in public, yet they determine the appearance of everything worn above them. Then comes the corset. Few objects from the period have attracted more legend. Some later accounts describe corsets as instruments of nearly universal suffering, while other historians point out that women wore them in many different ways, and not every corset was tightened to the dramatic extremes shown in cartoons and sensational stories. No one can quite agree on how common severe tight lacing truly was among wealthy women, although it certainly existed. For many women, the corset is simply part of getting dressed, as familiar as shoes or stockings. The maid positions it carefully and adjusts the lacing at the back. The intention is not merely to create a narrow waist. The corset also supports the torso and provides the structured foundation required by fashionable clothing. The pressure is real, though the degree varies from woman to woman. Fashion demands a particular architecture. Earlier in the Gilded Age, skirts may be supported by bustles that project behind the body. Later, silhouettes shift again. becoming narrower or more flowing before changing yet another time. Fashion seems almost incapable of remaining still. A bustle can be made from padded fabric, steel hoops, horsehair, or carefully arranged underskirts. Its purpose is to create volume where fashion dictates that volume should exist. The result can make sitting somewhat complicated. Chairs designed for fashionable women sometimes accommodate the arrangement better than ordinary furniture, though the wearer still learns how to lower herself carefully without crushing the structure beneath her gown. One might say that elegant sitting becomes a small domestic skill. Over the foundational garments comes the dress itself. Morning gowns are generally less formal than what will be worn for afternoon calls or evening entertainment. A wealthy woman may choose a soft wool, silk, cotton, or patterned fabric depending upon the season and occasion. Even informal clothing, however, can involve considerable ornament lace at the collar, embroidery along the sleeves, small covered buttons, ribbons, pleating, or decorative trimming. Colours carry social meaning as well. Age, marital status, season, mourning customs, and personal taste all influence what is considered appropriate. Deep jewel tones may appear during colder months, while lighter shades suit warm weather and daylight occasions. Black, of course, can mean far more than simple preference. Mourning etiquette remains remarkably complicated. A widow may pass through stages of mourning in which certain fabrics, especially dull black crepe, are favoured first, followed gradually by softer materials and restrained colours. Jewellery may also change. Jet made from fossilised wood becomes strongly associated with mourning and is worn in necklaces, brooches, bracelets, and earrings. Some women even wear jewellery containing the hair of a deceased relative. To modern eyes, such pieces can appear unusually intimate, but hair jewellery has a long history as a remembrance object. A lock of hair does not decay quickly, and for families living in an age when death remains a familiar visitor, it can become a strangely comforting physical connection to someone who is gone. On an ordinary morning, however, the jewellery is lighter. Perhaps a brooch is fastened at the throat, perhaps small earrings are chosen, a watch may hang from a chain or be tucked into the clothing, rings are considered, a bracelet is clasped around one wrist. The maid knows where each piece is kept. She also knows the private geography of the dressing table. Combs lie in one place, hairpins in another, bottles of perfume stand beside brushes with silver backs. Small jars contain creams and powders. A hand mirror catches the pale morning light from the windows. Cosmetics exist in an uncertain social position. Respectable women use powders, lotions, and complexion preparations, but obvious makeup may still be associated with actresses or women considered socially improper. The ideal is often to appear naturally beautiful, even when considerable effort has gone into producing that natural appearance. Rice powder can reduce shine. Cold creams soften the skin. Toilet waters add fragrance. Some complexion products contain ingredients that would later be recognized as harmful, including lead or mercury compounds, though awareness of their dangers is slowly increasing. Beauty advice is full of curious remedies. Women are told to wash the face with milk, rosewater, cucumber preparations, oatmeal mixtures, or various herbal infusions. Some recommendations are harmless, others are considerably less wise. Hair requires even more attention. Long hair remains fashionable, but it is usually arranged rather than worn loose. The maid brushes it thoroughly, dividing and twisting sections into coils, waves, braids, or elaborate pinned forms suited to the current style. The appearance may look effortless when completed. It is not. Hairpins disappear beneath carefully arranged loops. Small pads or false hair pieces can add volume. In earlier decades especially, hair collected from the woman's own brush may be saved in a small container known as a hair receiver. Rather than being discarded, these strands can eventually be used to create additional padding for hairstyles. The object often sits innocently on the dressing table, decorative and lidded, concealing its rather practical contents. Historians continue to debate exactly how widespread some of these practices were across different classes, but surviving objects show that hair receivers certainly belong to the material world of fashionable dressing. By now, the bedroom has become brighter. Morning sunlight touches the edges of the curtains, and the fire in the grate no longer seems quite as necessary as it did upon waking. Shoes are brought forward. Button boots are common for daytime wear. Their rows of tiny buttons may require a small button hook, one of those ordinary objects once found in dressing rooms everywhere and almost forgotten today. The narrow metal hook slips through the buttonhole, catches the button, and pulls it neatly into place. Gloves wait nearby. A fashionable woman rarely approaches public society with bare hands. Gloves protect the skin, complete the outfit, and serve as another small sign that she understands the rules of respectable appearance. Then there is the hat. Daytime hats can be architectural creations in themselves, decorated with ribbon, feathers, flowers, lace, or other trimming. Some become so large and elaborate that newspapers joke about them, though fashion rarely seems troubled by practical objections. The maid secures the hat with long hat pins. By the time the process is finished, the woman reflected in the mirror looks very different from the figure who sat quietly over breakfast not long before. The transformation is subtle but important. Private comfort has given way to public presentation. Every fold has been arranged, every fastening has been checked, the hair is pinned into place, the gloves, hat, parasol, handkerchief, and perhaps a small purse are ready. Downstairs, clocks continue marking the morning. Outside, carriage wheels pass over the street. Inside the dressing room, there is a final moment of stillness as the maid smooths one sleeve and adjusts one last ribbon. Then the millionaire's wife rises. Her day has not yet truly entered society, but she is dressed for the world that expects her. Word count 1067. Awaiting continue. Once dressed, the millionaire's wife leaves the privacy of the upper floor and enters the more formal machinery of the household. The mansion may appear quiet from the grand staircase, its polished banister shining in the morning light and its carpets softened beneath her steps. But behind the walls and beyond the doors intended for guests, another world has already been moving for hours. A large Gilded Age residence is not simply a home, it is almost a small institution. Depending on the family's wealth and habits, there may be a butler, housekeeper, cook, kitchen maids, chambermaids, laundresses, footmen, coachmen, grooms, gardeners, furnace workers, valets, personal maids, and occasionally additional servants hired whenever the household is preparing for an important dinner or receiving guests. No one can quite agree on what should count as a typical staff for the very rich because households differed enormously. Some maintained perhaps a dozen indoor and outdoor servants. The greatest mansions could depend on several times that number, especially when country estates, stables, yachts, or seasonal residences were included. The woman of the house rarely supervises every servant directly. That would be considered inefficient, and in the most formal households, almost improper. Instead, authority travels through a hierarchy. The butler usually directs the male indoor servants and oversees the dining room, wine cellar, silver, and much of the public-facing service of the house. The housekeeper manages many of the female servants, supervises cleaning, linens, bedrooms, and storerooms, and becomes one of the most important people in the daily operation of the mansion. The mistress of the house therefore conducts much of her domestic management through these senior servants. A morning meeting with the housekeeper may seem small beside the glittering dinners and elaborate balls associated with Gilded Age wealth, but it is here that many practical decisions are made. Guest rooms must be prepared, flowers need replacing, a curtain may require repair, a carpet has been stained, a bedroom fireplace is smoking badly. Several sheets have disappeared into the laundry and have not returned. A visiting relative is expected on Thursday rather than Friday. A maid has requested an afternoon away. The mistress may listen, decide, authorize purchases, or simply ask the housekeeper to handle the matter. In some households, she keeps household books or examines summaries of expenses. In others, the housekeeper records purchases while the mistress approves larger amounts. Wealth does not eliminate accounting. It merely changes the scale of what must be counted. Candles, soap, coal, food, linens, breakages, flowers, cleaning supplies, servants' wages, carriage expenses, and countless smaller costs accumulate continuously. Even a mansion full of electric lighting as the century progresses does not suddenly become effortless. Early electrical systems can be unreliable, and many wealthy homes continue to use gas lights, lamps, or candles alongside them. Behind the impressive rooms, practical concerns remain stubbornly ordinary. Dust settles, silver tarnishes, boots track mud, chimneys gather soot, water must be heated, beds must be made. The great difference is that the family rarely performs these tasks personally. The silver alone can demand extraordinary care. Dining rooms and sideboards may contain large collections of serving dishes, trays, candlesticks, tea services, cutlery, and ornamental pieces. These objects are expensive, highly visible, and expected to shine. Servants polish them using powders and cloths, working patiently over surfaces that will perhaps appear on a dinner table for only a few hours. Some wealthy families keep valuable silver locked away when not in use, and the butler may carry keys to cupboards or storerooms under his authority. The keys themselves become symbols of trust. Housekeeping requires an astonishing number of keys. There may be keys for linen closets, china cupboards, pantries, wine stores, medicine cabinets, silver safes, and rooms rarely opened. The housekeeper sometimes carries a heavy ring of them, the faint metal sound accompanying her through service passages. It is one of those little noises that belongs almost entirely to a vanished domestic world. The mistress may next discuss menus. Dinner is still many hours away, but planning begins early. The cook needs to know how many people will dine, whether guests are expected, whether anyone has dietary preferences, and what ingredients are available. Foods may arrive through local markets, specialized suppliers, private gardens, or trusted merchants. The kitchen itself is usually far removed from the elegant dining room. In urban mansions, it may occupy a basement or lower service floor, where heat, steam, knives, pots, and constant movement create an atmosphere completely different from the calm rooms above. Breakfast dishes are being cleared while preparations for luncheon have already begun. A stock pot simmers. Bread is sliced. Vegetables are washed. A kitchen maid may be cleaning fish or peeling potatoes. Iceboxes require attention, particularly before mechanical refrigeration becomes common. Large blocks of ice, delivered regularly, help keep perishables cool. Sawdust can be used to insulate stored ice, a simple technique inherited from an age when keeping food cold demanded physical planning. Even in the homes of millionaires, ice melts. The house cannot purchase its way out of every law of nature. Laundry is another hidden undertaking. Fine clothing, table linens, bed sheets, napkins, towels, lace, and servants' uniforms create an endless cycle of washing, drying, ironing, folding, repairing, and storing. Some wealthy households send portions of the laundry outside. Others employ laundresses, either resident or visiting. The work is exhausting. Water is heated. Garments are soaked. Soap is rubbed into fabric. Heavy wet linen is lifted and wrung. Irons are heated, and starch is applied where crispness is desired. A shirt front or table napkin that appears perfectly smooth at dinner may represent a surprising amount of labour. The lady of the house sees the result. The servants know the process. Occasionally, she may inspect linen cupboards with the housekeeper. Sheets and towels are counted carefully because textiles are valuable. Fine household linen can be marked with embroidered initials or numbers so that pieces belonging to different rooms or sets are not confused. Older fabric is not simply discarded. Worn sheets may be cut down for smaller beds. Damaged cloth can become cleaning rags. Fine lace might be removed from an aging garment and reused elsewhere. Luxury and thrift coexist more comfortably than modern stereotypes sometimes suggest. Even wealthy households dislike waste when an object can still serve a purpose. Servants themselves require management as well. Hiring domestic workers can be difficult, and newspapers of the era frequently complain about what employers call the servant problem. Mistresses lament workers leaving without warning, demanding higher wages, or objecting to certain duties. Servants, when their experiences survive in letters or memoirs, often describe the other side: long hours, limited privacy, demanding employers, strict rules, and the expectation of constant availability. Historians continue to debate how much authority a wealthy mistress personally exercised compared with senior servants because the answer changed from house to house. Some women involve themselves deeply in domestic details. Others barely enter the service areas at all. A household may provide servants with uniforms, meals, and small attic or basement bedrooms. Days off vary. Visitors can be restricted. Curfews may exist. Even friendships between servants and members of the family can be discouraged because social boundaries are expected to remain clear. Yet familiarity inevitably develops. A maid may know her mistress's moods better than distant relatives do. A housekeeper may remain with one family for decades. A nurse may be deeply loved by children who see considerably less of their parents. By late morning, The public rooms have taken on their finished appearance. Fresh flowers stand in vases. The drawing room is arranged. Ash has been removed from fireplaces. A faint polish shines on wooden furniture. In the hallway, footsteps soften and disappear into another room. Outside the windows, the city grows louder, but within the mansion, order settles across the surface once more. The millionaire's wife may pause beside a writing table, satisfied that luncheon is planned, guest rooms are ready, and the housekeeper understands the day's instructions. What appears to visitors as effortless elegance has been built from dozens of invisible decisions. And with the household now moving according to plan, another set of obligations waits on the desk before her invitations: calling cards, letters, and the delicate social arithmetic of deciding which must be answered first. Word count 1, testament 2, awaiting continue. The writing table waits in a room designed to suggest ease. There may be a small vase of flowers beside the blotter, a silver letter opener, a porcelain inkstand, and several neat stacks of cream-coloured stationery embossed with the family address. Yet the work performed here is not entirely leisurely. For a wealthy woman of the Gilded Age, correspondence is one of the principal tools by which social life is maintained, and a morning can vanish into envelopes, invitations, calling cards, notes of thanks, and careful decisions about whom to see and whom, for the moment, to avoid. The mail has usually been sorted before it reaches her. A servant may place the more personal letters on her desk while household bills and business matters are directed elsewhere. Invitations are opened and examined. Some are engraved on the thick paper, others are handwritten. There may be a dinner invitation for Thursday, a musicale on Friday, an afternoon reception, a charity meeting, an opera engagement, a wedding announcement, or a request to serve on a committee. Each carries a little weight. The problem is not simply whether she wishes to attend. She must consider whether another engagement already occupies that hour, whether accepting one invitation might offend someone else, whether the hostess belongs to the correct social circle, whether her husband is expected to accompany her, whether mourning customs permit the event, whether she has recently declined too many invitations from the same household, and whether attending might create an obligation to invite those people in return. This is where wealth begins to resemble a schedule written in invisible ink. A single acceptance can lead to 3 more duties. Social etiquette books attempt to bring order to such matters. They explain how quickly an invitation should be answered, how a note of condolence ought to be worded, when a married woman may call upon another household, and even which kinds of paper are suitable for particular messages. Not everyone obeys every rule. No one can quite agree on how strictly ordinary upper-class families followed the elaborate etiquette described in manuals, which were often more prescriptive than real life. Still, in the highest levels of society, knowing the expected form could prevent embarrassment. A formal dinner invitation is usually answered promptly. If accepted, the commitment is serious. Cancelling without illness or genuine emergency can be considered rude. If declined, the language must be polite enough to preserve the relationship. A card may be sufficient for some occasions. Others require a handwritten note. Penmanship matters. A woman's handwriting is expected to be legible and graceful, and many girls from prosperous families have practiced it since childhood. The result is often a flowing hand that looks effortless, until one remembers the years of instruction behind it. Ink must dry before the page is folded. Blotting paper helps prevent smudges. Wax seals have largely given way to adhesive envelopes for everyday correspondence, although decorative seals and monograms remain fashionable. A family crest, initials, or address printed on stationery quietly communicates identity before the recipient has read a word. Then there are calling cards. Few objects look less threatening. A small rectangle of stiff paper bearing a name, sometimes an address, occasionally a day designated for receiving visitors. Yet these cards form part of an elaborate social language. When a woman visits another household, a servant may carry her card to the door. If the lady of the house is not receiving, the card is left behind. Depending on custom and period, folded corners or multiple names on a card can communicate particular meanings, although historians continue to debate how universally these small coded practices were followed. The essential principle is simpler. The card proves that the visit was made. That matters. In a society where respectable women are expected to maintain relationships through personal calls, forgetting to visit someone who has visited you can become an offence. The calling card therefore acts as both courtesy and evidence. Cards collect on trays near the entrance hall. A silver card receiver can become a quiet record of the household's social traffic. Names arrive, remain for a time, and disappear. Some belong to intimate friends, others represent people the family barely knows. A newly arrived family may try to enter society by arranging introductions and leaving cards with established households. Whether those cards are returned can determine how warmly the newcomers are received. This process could be especially important in cities such as New York, where old families sometimes regarded newly wealthy industrial fortunes with suspicion. Money may purchase the house. It does not automatically purchase acceptance. The Gilded Age is full of families who have recently acquired immense wealth through railroads, mining, banking, steel, oil, manufacturing, and real estate. Their wives may find themselves responsible for converting financial success into social position. That work often happens not in offices but in drawing rooms. A woman studies invitations, remembers birthdays, writes notes of sympathy, sends flowers, accepts charitable responsibilities, and plans introductions that may benefit her children years later. Marriage prospects hover quietly behind some of these calculations. A daughter approaching adulthood must be introduced to suitable society. A son may need connections. Families form alliances through dinners, summer visits, clubs, and weddings. A mother's address book can therefore possess a kind of power that never appears on a company balance sheet. Some wealthy women keep detailed lists of acquaintances and obligations. Others rely on memory, secretaries, or servants. A personal secretary becomes increasingly useful for women with extensive charitable and social responsibilities, especially as organizations and correspondence expand. The secretary may draft routine letters, organize appointments, or maintain files, while the mistress adds personal notes where necessary. Even small gestures require timing. A death in a family calls for a letter or card of condolence. A wedding may require a gift. A birth calls for congratulations. An illness may justify flowers or inquiries. After a formal dinner, a hostess might expect acknowledgement. After staying as a guest in someone's country house, a thoughtful letter of thanks is appropriate. There are also visits that must be postponed because of mourning. Victorian and Gilded Age mourning customs shape social calendars in ways difficult to imagine now. A woman recently bereaved may withdraw from dinners, balls, and theatres for a prescribed period. The length depends upon the relationship to the deceased and upon family practice. Widows are expected to observe the most severe restrictions. Black clothing, dark stationery borders, subdued visits, and reduced public entertainment can continue for months or even years. Some families become very strict about these periods, others shorten them, particularly toward the end of the century. Even now, historians continue to debate how deeply individuals believed in every mourning convention compared with how much they simply obeyed social expectation. Belief and performance are often difficult to separate. On the desk, however, both take the form of paper. A black-edged note arrives from one household. A cheerful invitation arrives from another. A charitable committee asks for funds. A relative asks whether she will visit Newport during the summer. The millionaire's wife moves from one to the next, her pen travelling slowly across the pages. Outside, the city has reached the bright middle of the day. Carriage wheels pass beneath the windows, and somewhere in the hall a clock sounds the hour with a restrained metallic chime. The house remains polished and quiet. A servant enters to collect completed letters and carries them away for posting. One small pile remains. These are the cards she will take with her. Soon the drawing room, desk, and inkstand will be left behind. Gloves will be checked. A coat or wrap may be added depending on the weather. The carriage will be brought around. The morning of written obligations is giving way to the afternoon of personal appearances. The same names that have sat silently on paper will soon belong to doors, parlours, staircases, and brief conversations carried out beneath chandeliers while horses wait patiently at the curb. Word count 1, 64, awaiting continue. By early afternoon, the mansion has changed character again. The private routines of mourning are complete. Correspondence has been answered. Household questions have been settled for the moment, and the millionaire's wife is ready to leave the house. Somewhere near the service entrance, a footman has received word that the carriage is required. In the stable, harness is checked, leather straps are fastened. and horses are brought forward beneath the practiced hands of men who know that fashionable society does not like to be kept waiting. Her outdoor clothes have already been chosen. A walking dress would not necessarily be suitable for a formal round of calls. Instead, she may wear a carefully tailored afternoon gown, gloves, a hat secured with long pins, and a coat or mantle appropriate to the season. A parasol might accompany her in warmer weather. In colder months, fur trimming, a muff, or a heavy wrap helps keep out the wind during the brief passages between carriage and doorway. The distinction matters because afternoon calling is not casual visiting, it is a ritual. By the late 19th century, fashionable households often designate particular afternoons when the lady of the house will receive visitors. These occasions may be known as at homes, and acquaintances understand that they may call during the stated hours without arranging a private appointment beforehand. Some visits last only a few minutes. That brevity is part of the skill. A woman is expected to appear interested without overstaying, friendly without becoming overly familiar, and perfectly composed while moving through several houses in a single afternoon. No one can quite agree on how faithfully every wealthy family followed the most elaborate rules found in etiquette manuals. Customs varied between cities and changed over time. Yet surviving cards, diaries, and memoirs make clear that formal calling played a significant part in elite social life. The carriage waits beneath the entrance canopy. A servant opens the door, and she steps inside without needing to gather her skirts against muddy wheels or search for a public conveyance. The interior is upholstered and enclosed, providing shelter from dust, wind, and curious eyes. For the wealthiest families, the carriage itself communicates status. The horses are well matched, harness fittings shine. The coachman wears a carefully maintained uniform. A footman may ride behind or beside the driver, ready to descend whenever the carriage stops. Then the wheels begin turning, the mansion slips behind. Along fashionable streets, other carriages are already moving between rows of brownstones, limestone facades, hotels, clubs, and increasingly extravagant private residences. Shop windows gleam beneath awnings. Delivery carts move more slowly near the curb. Street sweepers fight a losing battle against mud, horse manure, dust, and discarded straw. Gilded Age cities are elegant only from certain angles. A fine carriage might pass within minutes from an avenue lined with mansions into streets crowded with tenements, warehouses, workshops, and labourers. The contrast is impossible to remove entirely, even if wealthy residents try not to dwell upon it. Inside her carriage, the millionaire's wife may hold a small card case containing her engraved calling cards. The first destination is perhaps the home of an older acquaintance. When the carriage stops, the footman descends and opens the door. She walks up the steps and rings. A servant answers. This moment contains several possibilities. If the lady of the house is receiving, the visitor enters. If she is absent or unavailable, a card is left instead. In some cases, the visitor may not even leave the carriage herself, sending the footman to the door with the card. A successful call leads into the drawing room. The atmosphere is arranged to appear effortless. Curtains soften the afternoon light. Chairs stand at convenient conversational angles. Flowers may occupy a central table. Decorative objects brought from Europe or Asia sit on shelves and mantels, quietly announcing travel and taste. Tea may be offered. Depending on the household, there could be thin sandwiches, cakes, biscuits, or small sweets. Tea tables themselves become important pieces of social furniture, and the ability to pour gracefully while maintaining conversation is another small accomplishment expected of a hostess. The visit remains restrained. Conversation might touch upon mutual acquaintances, a recent concert, a forthcoming charity event, travel plans, an illness in the family, or a wedding engagement not yet publicly announced. More controversial subjects are handled carefully. Etiquette advice often warns against discussing money too openly, criticizing absent acquaintances, or introducing topics likely to produce unpleasant disagreement. Actual drawing rooms, naturally, are not always so disciplined. Gossip travels with impressive efficiency. Still, the ideal is smoothness. The millionaire's wife listens, answers, smiles when appropriate, and notices everything. A new painting may indicate that the household has recently returned from Europe. A daughter appearing in the room may suggest that her formal introduction to society is approaching. An empty chair belonging to an elderly relative may quietly hint at illness. Even flowers can carry meaning, if they have clearly been sent by another family. Social intelligence grows from these small observations. The visit ends before it becomes burdensome. Farewells are exchanged, and she returns to the carriage. The horses move again. Another address waits only a few blocks away. At the next house, perhaps nobody is receiving. Her card disappears into the hands of a servant, adding one more name to the collection on a silver tray. At another, she may encounter 3 or 4 women already seated together. This changes the conversation. Private matters disappear. Everyone becomes slightly more formal. New arrivals are acknowledged. Introductions are made if necessary. Gloves remain on for much of the visit. Coats may be removed depending upon the length and formality of the call, though a very brief caller remains dressed for departure. Among the curious customs surrounding visiting is the complicated etiquette of cards themselves. Earlier manuals describe corners being folded or initials being added to indicate whether a call is personal, congratulatory, or related to condolence. By the Gilded Age, some of these codes are fading or becoming less consistent. Historians continue to debate how widely every variation was actually understood. What matters more is the principle that a card represents presence. To leave one is to say that the relationship has not been forgotten. The millionaire's wife may spend 2 hours making such calls without having a conversation lasting longer than 15 minutes. The ritual sounds leisurely. It can be surprisingly tiring. Heavy clothing restricts movement. Repeated carriage rides offer little exercise. Drawing rooms are sometimes overheated in winter. Every conversation requires attention. Names, relationships, and obligations must be remembered. A mistake can circulate quickly. Calling on the wrong day may be embarrassing. Ignoring someone's visit too long can be interpreted as a deliberate slight. Failing to acknowledge a new bride or recently bereaved widow can offend an entire family. Social life therefore requires memory almost as much as charm. As the afternoon advances, sunlight begins to lower against the upper stories of the houses. The shadows of carriage wheels stretch across the street. Inside the carriage, there is a moment of quiet between visits. The woman leans back against the upholstery. For perhaps 30 seconds, nobody expects conversation from her. Outside, horses breathe faint clouds into the cold air if it is winter. Harness buckles make a gentle metallic sound. Farther away comes the dull rhythm of wheels and hooves moving through the city. Then the carriage stops once more. The footman descends. Another staircase rises toward another polished door. Another card is selected from its case, and the careful network of Gilded Age society continues to build itself, house by house, visit by visit, through brief encounters that appear trivial until one realizes how much status, friendship, marriage, reputation, and opportunity depend upon being remembered at precisely the right door. Word count 1075. Awaiting continue. When the carriage leaves the last drawing room behind, the afternoon does not necessarily carry the millionaire's wife home. There are still purchases to make, fittings to attend, flowers to order, perhaps a gift to choose, and a dressmaker who has been waiting for her since noon. In the commercial districts of the great American cities, an entirely different side of Gilded Age wealth is on display. Not behind private doors, but in shop windows glowing with silk, silver, glass, polished wood, and objects brought from across the Atlantic. Shopping is becoming an experience in its own right. Department stores are expanding rapidly during the late 19th century, particularly in cities such as New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Boston. Their great halls allow prosperous women to move through a public space that is considered respectable, comfortable, and increasingly designed with them in mind. Elevators, elaborate displays, restaurants, ladies' parlours, and attentive clerks turn shopping into something more than purchasing necessities. For a millionaire's wife, however, the most important purchases may still happen in smaller establishments where personal service matters. The carriage stops outside a dressmaker's salon. A servant helps her descend, and she enters a quieter world of fabric and mirrors. The fitting rooms are far removed from the noisy workrooms where much of the actual sewing takes place. Here, bolts of silk and velvet may be spread across tables. Fashion plates imported from Paris lie open for inspection. Trimmings are arranged in boxes. Sample sleeves, lace, embroidery, and ribbons wait to be considered. Paris remains an enormous influence over elite fashion. A woman with sufficient money may order gowns directly from famous French houses or travel to Europe for fittings. Others rely on American dressmakers who closely follow Parisian styles. Some gowns arrive partially completed and are then altered locally. No one can quite agree on how closely wealthy American women copied European fashion without adaptation, because individual taste, regional custom, age, and social ambition all played a role, yet Parisian influence is unmistakable. The dressmaker understands that she is not merely selling cloth, she is helping construct reputation. A dinner gown must be grand without appearing vulgar. A visiting dress must be fashionable without competing with evening wear. A gown for a daughter's debut must make the young woman visible, while preserving the family's idea of respectable elegance. The millionaire's wife may stand on a small fitting platform while assistants move around her. Pins are inserted, a seam is marked. The bodice is adjusted, a train is lifted and examined, sleeves are reconsidered. The process can continue far longer than anyone who sees the finished garment would ever guess. One gown may require dozens of hours of skilled labour. Fine dresses are often made with complicated internal structures, including boning, padding, tapes, hooks, and carefully fitted linings. The visible silk is only the outermost layer of a miniature piece of engineering. The customer chooses between colours: deep burgundy, emerald, ivory, pale blue, black trimmed with jet. Perhaps she runs a gloved hand across a length of satin, while the dressmaker explains how it will fall beneath evening light. Natural and synthetic dyes have transformed the range of fashionable colours during the 19th century. Some hues once difficult or expensive to produce become far more widely available. This creates fashions for brilliant purples, greens, blues, and reds that would have startled earlier generations. Not every fashionable colour is harmless. Certain vivid greens produced with arsenic compounds become notorious during the 19th century. By the later Gilded Age, concern about poisonous dyes is already widespread, though dangerous materials have not disappeared entirely. The history of luxury often contains such strange contradictions, beautiful objects made possible by materials no sensible person would willingly place against the skin today. The fitting ends with measurements recorded and promises made regarding delivery. From there, the carriage may continue to a jeweller. Jewellery has meanings beyond decoration. A husband's success can be displayed in diamonds resting at his wife's throat. Family inheritance appears in pearls, brooches, rings, and necklaces passed down through generations. New fortunes sometimes imitate old ones by purchasing objects with European histories attached to them. The wealthiest American families buy remarkable quantities of art and decorative objects during this period. European paintings cross the Atlantic, tapestries leave old estates, antique furniture is shipped in crates, architectural fragments, carved panels, fireplaces, and even entire rooms are purchased and reassembled inside American mansions. A woman shopping for her home can therefore move from choosing a bracelet to examining a 17th century cabinet without seeing any contradiction between the two. Collectors often believe that possessing old European objects gives cultural depth to new American wealth. Whether every object has the history claimed by dealers is another matter. Even now, historians and curators continue to debate the provenance of some pieces acquired during the age of enthusiastic collecting. Then comes the florist. Flowers are essential to the social world. They decorate dining tables, drawing rooms, ballrooms, bedrooms, conservatories, and carriage interiors. They are sent to congratulate, apologize, mourn, flirt, and express gratitude. The so-called language of flowers remains familiar to many people during the period, although its codes are far from universal. Different books assign different meanings to the same blossom, making the idea of a perfectly reliable floral vocabulary more romantic than practical. Still, associations matter. Violets suggest modest affection. Roses carry meaning shaped by colour. Lilies may accompany mourning or religious symbolism. A carefully chosen bouquet can therefore appear more thoughtful than a random arrangement. The millionaire's wife may order flowers for dinner that evening. She does not necessarily carry them home. The florist takes the address, the instructions, perhaps the preferred colours, and sends them later by delivery wagon. The same applies to many purchases. A wealthy shopper need not burden herself with packages. Bills can be sent to the household. Goods can be delivered. Clerks recognize regular customers and may even bring selections to private homes for inspection. Credit is an important part of elite shopping. Accounts are kept with favoured merchants, sometimes for months before settlement. This system depends heavily on reputation. A known family may purchase freely in ways impossible for an unknown customer. But wealth also encourages comparison. A woman may know which jeweller another family uses. She may recognise the dressmaker responsible for a rival's gown. She may notice that someone has appeared twice in the same expensive evening dress. Although repeating garments is far more common than caricatures of Gilded Age excess suggest, clothing can be altered and retrimmed. A lace panel may be moved. Sleeves are changed. A skirt is reshaped. Older gowns can gain surprisingly long lives because fine fabric is too valuable to discard casually. This quiet recycling is another detail often hidden beneath the period's reputation for extravagance. Eventually, the shopping round slows. The afternoon light has softened into gold along the buildings. Store windows begin to glow more warmly as lamps are lit inside. A faint chill settles along the street. The carriage door closes behind her. For the first time in some hours, there are no clerks presenting objects, no dressmaker adjusting hems, no hostess making conversation. Only the muffled sound of wheels remains. The horses move steadily through traffic as packages she never carried begin their separate journeys toward the mansion. A new gown will arrive later. Flowers will come before dinner. A jeweller may send a velvet box for approval. And somewhere behind the glittering storefronts, seamstresses, delivery boys, porters, clerks, florists, and craftsmen continue working so that wealth can appear, once again, as something light, graceful, and almost effortless. Word count 1071, awaiting continue. By the time the carriage turns away from the shops, the afternoon has already accumulated its small weight of choices, greetings, fittings, cards, and purchases. Yet the day is far from finished. For many wealthy women, one of the most useful and revealing parts of the social schedule takes place around a luncheon table, where a meal that appears relaxed can quietly carry information from one household to another. A formal luncheon is less grand than an evening dinner, but it is not careless. The hostess has considered the guest list in advance. She has decided who should sit near whom, which women know one another well, which acquaintance might benefit from an introduction, and which two guests are better kept comfortably separated. The table may be smaller than the one used at dinner, yet the same attention to linen, porcelain, silver, flowers, and service remains. When the millionaire's wife arrives, a servant receives her wrap. Her hat may remain on in some circumstances, particularly during a brief or less formal daytime gathering, though customs vary with decade and occasion. Gloves are removed when food is served. There is no single rule followed everywhere. No one can quite agree on the precise boundaries between luncheon, lunch, afternoon reception, and informal midday dining during the rapidly changing etiquette of the late 19th century. Manuals provide firm instructions, but households adapt them according to region, wealth, and habit. The guests gather first in a drawing room. There may be 6 women, perhaps 8, perhaps more. The gathering feels intimate compared with a ball, but intimacy does not mean informality. Each woman carries her own web of family alliances, friendships, rivalries, responsibilities, and expectations into the room. When luncheon is announced, they move toward the dining room. The table might be dressed with white damask and scented with seasonal flowers. Crystal catches the afternoon light. Silver reflects small, distorted images of hands and sleeves. The meal itself varies. There may be soup, fish, chicken, croquettes, salads, vegetables, breads, fruit, moulded dishes, pastries, or chilled desserts. Wealthy households have access to an extraordinary range of ingredients through improved transportation and refrigeration. Foods that once depended heavily on local seasons can now arrive by rail from considerable distances. Menus are often influenced by French cooking. French names appear frequently on formal menus, partly because French cuisine carries prestige among wealthy Americans and partly because elite cooks may have trained in European traditions. The cook below stairs has been preparing for hours. Up here, however, the meal seems simply to appear. A footman approaches quietly from the left or right according to the household's chosen service style. Plates are removed, glasses are refilled, a serving dish passes without interruption. The guest speaks softly across the table. This is where luncheon becomes something more important than food. Family news circulates. Someone's daughter is expected to make her debut during the winter season. A cousin has returned unexpectedly from Europe. A widow may be considering leaving her townhouse and spending a year abroad. A young man has been seen frequently in the company of a particular family. A charitable committee has lost its treasurer. A new opera singer has become fashionable. A house under construction is rumoured to contain a ballroom larger than anyone considers necessary. The details sound small. Together, they form a map of society. For women excluded from many formal centres of economic and political authority, social gatherings can provide another kind of influence. Information passes through drawing rooms and dining rooms with remarkable speed. A wealthy woman may learn at luncheon that a family intends to sell land, that a charitable institution needs a new patron, that an acquaintance is seeking employment for a relative, or that a marriage negotiation is quietly progressing. She does not necessarily act upon this information, but she remembers it. Memory is one of the hidden skills of her position. She must know who is related to whom, who recently suffered a bereavement, whose daughter is engaged, whose husband has entered politics, which family has moved away, and who should not be seated beside whom at dinner. A mistake can seem minor to an outsider and enormous to the people involved. The conversation may turn toward charity. One woman is raising funds for a hospital. Another supports a settlement house. A third is concerned with an orphanage, church mission, library, school, or organisation assisting poor mothers. Charitable work offers wealthy women an accepted route beyond the household. It also creates social prestige. Generosity and ambition can exist at the same time. Some women are deeply committed to reform and devote enormous energy to it. Others lend names and money without much personal involvement. Many fall somewhere between those extremes. Historians continue to debate how charitable activity should be understood in the Gilded Age, because philanthropy could provide real assistance while also allowing wealthy families to shape institutions according to their own values. At the luncheon table, however, such debates are unlikely to appear in academic language. Instead, there are subscriptions. A woman promises $50, another offers to host a benefit. Someone suggests asking a wealthy widow who has recently inherited money. Someone else quietly remarks that the widow is still in mourning and should probably not be approached yet. Even compassion has etiquette. Meals themselves contain curious customs. Finger bowls may appear toward the end of a formal meal, holding a small quantity of water, sometimes with a slice of lemon or a flower floating within. Diners lightly rinse their fingertips before drying them on the napkin. For anyone unfamiliar with the practice, the little bowl might seem like a very small and disappointing portion of soup, but no explanation is needed among these guests. Knowing what to do is part of belonging. The same applies to the bewildering collection of forks, knives, spoons, glasses, plates, and serving pieces that can accompany formal dining. The rule of working inward from the outermost utensils simplifies matters somewhat, though place settings vary. A woman raised in wealthy society has practiced these movements since childhood. Nothing should appear studied. That is the ideal. Even elegance must pretend to be natural. After the heavier courses are removed, dessert arrives. Perhaps there are delicate pastries, fruit, ice cream, or a moulded cream set with gelatin. Ice cream has become far more accessible than it was generations earlier. But in a wealthy household it can still be presented elaborately, shaped into flowers, fruits, or decorative forms. Coffee may follow. The women remain at the table or move back into the drawing room. The atmosphere loosens slightly. One guest admires an embroidered screen. Another asks about a painting acquired in Paris. Somebody notices the flowers and requests the name of the florist. This is how fashionable taste spreads. An object seen in one mansion appears in another months later. A particular colour becomes popular. A decorator gains new clients. A dressmaker becomes indispensable. The line between friendship and competition is often difficult to see. Not every rivalry is bitter. There is pleasure in these gatherings too. Many women genuinely enjoy one another's company. They laugh quietly, exchange family stories, compare travel experiences, recommend books, discuss music, and find in one another forms of companionship unavailable within formal marriages or heavily managed households. For some, luncheon is one of the few periods of the day in which conversation belongs almost entirely to women. The men are elsewhere, at offices, at clubs, at banks, at exchanges, at factories, or perhaps simply behind the closed door of a private study. For an hour or two, the dining room becomes a female social world. Outside the windows, the afternoon has softened. Carriages move along the avenue under a sky beginning to lose its brightness. Inside, coffee cups rest on saucers, teaspoons make faint sounds against porcelain, and the flowers at the centre of the table have begun to open more fully in the warmth of the room. Eventually, someone glances toward the clock. Appointments remain. Children may be waiting at home. A committee meeting approaches. Another round of calls is possible. The gathering breaks gently rather than suddenly. Wraps are returned. Gloves are pulled on. Farewells are exchanged. The millionaire's wife steps again into her carriage carrying no documents, no official title, and perhaps no obvious evidence that anything important has happened. Yet she leaves with knowledge. She knows who is ill, who is travelling, who needs money, who is marrying, who has fallen from favour, which charity is gaining support, and which household will soon become important to know. The wheels turn toward home. Behind her, servants begin clearing the luncheon table. Ahead, the mansion waits in the fading afternoon light, and beyond its polished front rooms lies another quieter territory of her life, the nursery, the schoolroom, and the carefully supervised world of her children. Word count 1 as 204. Awaiting continue. The carriage does not always turn directly toward home. On certain afternoons, the millionaire's wife has another destination waiting for her, one that belongs neither to shopping nor to the formal pleasure of social calls. It may be a church committee room, a hospital office, a women's club, a charitable association, a school board meeting, or a quiet parlour borrowed for the afternoon by a group raising money for some public cause. For wealthy women of the Gilded Age, such work can fill a surprising portion of the week. The world around them is changing rapidly. Cities grow larger, immigration increases, factories expand, tenement districts become more crowded, public hospitals, libraries, orphanages, schools, settlement houses, and reform organisations multiply in response to the pressures of urban life. Women from wealthy families are often expected to participate. Sometimes the expectation comes from religion. Churches have long encouraged charitable giving, and many prosperous women understand generosity as part of Christian duty. Parish organisations distribute clothing, coal, food, medicine, or money to families in need. Women sew garments, organise fairs, visit institutions, raise subscriptions, and oversee fundraising events. Sometimes the motivation is social. A fashionable charity can become an important place to be seen. Serving on the correct committee places a woman beside influential families. Her name may appear in newspapers. A benefit concert or charity ball allows generosity and social display to exist within the same room. Those two motives are not always easy to separate. No one can quite agree on how much Gilded Age philanthropy should be interpreted as sincere compassion, social obligation, personal ambition, or some mixture of all three. In most cases, it is probably the mixture that comes closest to the truth. The millionaire's wife steps from her carriage and enters a building far less luxurious than her own home. Perhaps the meeting is being held in a church parlour. The room smells faintly of wood polish and coal heat. Straight-backed chairs have been arranged around a long table. Papers wait in small stacks. A secretary has already prepared minutes from the previous meeting. Several women are present. Their hats and coats differ in style and expense, but they share the same practical purpose for the afternoon. A hospital needs funds for a new ward. An orphanage roof must be repaired. A relief organisation needs blankets before winter. A library hopes to purchase more books. A settlement worker requests money for classes offered to immigrant families. The millionaire's wife listens. This is one of the few arenas in which she may participate in something resembling public administration without holding public office. American women still lack the vote in most elections during much of the Gilded Age. Though suffrage campaigns are becoming increasingly visible, legal and political rights vary from state to state, and married women's property laws are changing gradually. Formal power remains limited. Informal influence does not. A woman with money can fund a building, establish a scholarship, support a museum, persuade friends to contribute, or place her family name on the wall of an institution expected to outlive her. Money speaks even when the person providing it does not hold office. The meeting begins. There may be reports from committees. A treasurer explains how much has been collected. Someone reads a letter from a physician. Another woman reports on a recent visit to a poor neighbourhood. The language of reform often reflects the assumptions of the wealthy. Some philanthropists describe poverty as a condition requiring discipline and moral improvement. Others become more aware of low wages, dangerous working conditions, overcrowding, and the structural causes that make poverty difficult to escape. Historians continue to debate the effectiveness of many charitable programs because some provided meaningful assistance while others imposed rigid expectations upon the people they intended to help. Yet within the room, practical questions dominate. How much coal can be purchased? Who will contact the grocer? Which family will sponsor the benefit? Should tickets cost $1 or $2? Who knows a musician willing to perform? Who can persuade the newspaper to mention the event? The millionaire's wife may volunteer her ballroom for a gathering. She may promise to speak with her husband. She may simply write a substantial check. But often she does more. Wealthy women can become skilled organizers. They keep lists. They recruit donors. They arrange transportation. They correspond with clergy, physicians, reformers, teachers, and other benefactors. Some become formidable administrators. A woman who appears decorative at dinner may spend the next afternoon comparing budgets and negotiating building costs. Women's clubs offer another form of activity. These organizations expand dramatically in the late 19th century. Some begin as literary or cultural circles. Others move toward education, civic reform, sanitation, public health, labor concerns, preservation, or political advocacy. A meeting may include a paper on history, a lecture on art, a discussion of municipal cleanliness, or a campaign to establish a public playground. The atmosphere can be serious but not severe. Tea may be served afterward. Coats rustle as women settle into chairs, notebooks open, pens scratch quietly across paper. The world of reform has its own small rituals. One curious custom associated with many charitable societies is the fundraising bazaar. Women spend weeks creating embroidered goods, preserves, decorative objects, cakes, and small handmade items to sell at church halls or private homes. Wealthy families contribute expensive prizes. Booths are decorated with flowers, flags, ribbons, or exotic themes considered fashionable at the time. The money raised might support a hospital bed, a missionary effort, an orphanage, or winter relief. Such events blur the line between work and entertainment. A wealthy woman might spend far more purchasing materials for a bazaar than the objects themselves ultimately earn. Yet the event brings people together, attracts additional donations, and keeps the cause visible. Not every charitable practice ages well. Some organizations distribute aid only after investigating whether a family is considered deserving. Visitors may inspect homes and ask personal questions about drinking, employment, religion, or household habits. The intention is often described as preventing dependency. To the recipient, it can feel intrusive. The millionaire's wife may never fully see this tension, or perhaps she does. Some wealthy women who spend time visiting poor districts become deeply unsettled by what they encounter. They see children working. They climb narrow staircases into overcrowded rooms. They smell factories, sewage, coal smoke, and damp clothing. They meet women labouring long hours for wages that would not purchase a single decorative object from an elite drawing room. These visits can alter perspectives. For a few women, philanthropy becomes reform. They begin supporting housing improvements, labour protections, public sanitation, education, or women's political organisations. Others remain cautious, believing charity should relieve suffering without challenging the social order that produced so much of the wealth supporting the charity in the first place. The contradiction follows the Gilded Age everywhere. A fortune built by factories may fund a hospital for workers. A railroad fortune may establish a library in a town reshaped by the railroad. A mining fortune may endow a school while miners remain in dangerous conditions. No one in the committee room resolves these contradictions during one afternoon. The clock advances. Outside, the light has begun fading noticeably now. Rain may tap softly against the windows, or winter wind may press against the glass. Inside, the coal fire settles lower in the grate. Papers are gathered. Donations are recorded. One woman reminds another of a meeting later in the week. The millionaire's wife places her gloves back on. Before leaving, she may pause beside a box collecting small contributions for winter relief. Coins fall against the bottom with a faint metallic sound. Then the meeting disperses. Carriages wait along the curb. Drivers draw blankets more tightly around their knees. The women return to separate homes, carrying schedules, promises, and lists of people to contact. For the millionaire's wife, these hours represent something unusual. They allow her to step, however cautiously, beyond the ornamental expectations of elite domestic life. She may not vote, she may not hold the corporate office from which much of her household wealth originates, but through churches, clubs, hospitals, museums, schools, and charitable organizations, she can shape parts of the city around her. The power is indirect, it is imperfect, it is often constrained by class and convention. Still, it is real. As her carriage finally turns toward home, street lamps are beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. Shop windows glow, smoke drifts above rooftops. The city seems to soften at its edges. And behind the mansion windows ahead, another quieter set of responsibilities waits upstairs, in rooms decorated not for society but for children, lessons, nurses, toys, and the carefully managed world of family life. Word count 107 to us, awaiting continue. When the carriage finally returns to the mansion, the front steps are already beginning to lose the bright definition they had earlier in the day. Afternoon is sliding quietly toward evening. The lamps in the entrance hall have been lit. Servants move with greater purpose as dinner approaches, and somewhere above the formal rooms lies a part of the house that visitors rarely see in detail, the nursery and schoolroom. For the millionaire's wife, motherhood is shaped by the same abundance that governs the rest of her life. Her children do not usually spend the entire day beside her. A nurse, nursery maid, governess, tutor, or some combination of these figures supervises much of their routine. Very wealthy households may employ separate attendants for younger and older children. Boys and girls can follow different educational paths as they grow, especially once sons begin preparing for boarding school, university, or careers associated with the family's social position. No one can quite agree on how emotionally distant wealthy parents truly were from their children. Memoirs reveal enormous variation. Some children remembered affectionate mothers who visited nurseries daily, read stories, supervised lessons, and worried constantly about health. Others described childhoods organized almost entirely by nurses and governesses, with formal appearances before parents at designated hours. The stereotype of the distant Gilded Age mother therefore tells only part of the story. Still, the structure of the household creates distance almost automatically. The nursery may occupy an upper floor, safely removed from the formal drawing rooms where adults entertain guests. The rooms are simpler than the grand spaces below, but still comfortable. There may be painted furniture, rocking chairs, cupboards full of toys, small tables for lessons, framed prints, shelves of children's books, and sturdy carpets designed to endure more abuse than the delicate rugs downstairs. The millionaire's wife climbs toward this quieter level. Her gown, so carefully arranged for calls and shopping, seems almost too formal for the room she's entering. A nurse may rise when she appears. The youngest child has perhaps just awakened from an afternoon nap. Another sits at a table with a slate, copying letters or sums. An older daughter works on French pronunciation with a governess. A son may be reading history or Latin under a tutor's supervision. Education begins early among families who expect their children to occupy privileged positions. Lessons can include reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, history, music, drawing, French, German, dancing, and religious instruction. Boys may receive Latin or Greek in preparation for classical schooling. Girls are increasingly educated more seriously than in earlier generations, though expectations often remain shaped by the assumption that they will eventually manage wealthy households and participate in society. A girl may learn mathematics in the morning and embroidery in the afternoon. A boy may study Cicero and then be sent outdoors because everyone agrees that too much indoor study will ruin his constitution. Health theories surrounding children are numerous and often contradictory. Fresh air is praised enthusiastically. So is rest. Cold baths are recommended by some advisors and discouraged by others. Children are warned against damp feet, excessive sweets, overexcitement, poor posture, insufficient sleep, and reading in weak light. Many families believe strongly in strengthening the body through outdoor activity. Country estates provide gardens, horses, lawns, ponds, and long walks. In the city, children may be taken to parks under a nurse's supervision. The wealthy mother is expected to care deeply about her children's health, even if servants perform most of the physical labour involved. Illness is never far from the minds of parents during the 19th century. Medical advances are improving survival, but diseases that seem manageable today can still become dangerous quickly. Diphtheria, scarlet fever, pneumonia, tuberculosis, typhoid, and other infections remain frightening realities. A sudden fever can transform an orderly household overnight. Doctors are called, curtains are drawn, visitors are refused. The nursery becomes the centre of the mansion. One lesser-known practice is the careful preservation of children's hair, baby teeth, first shoes, or tiny garments as family keepsakes. Locks of hair may be tied with ribbon and stored in albums or boxes. Some mothers keep detailed baby books recording first words, illnesses, birthdays, and physical development. These objects carry an emotional weight very different from the public displays downstairs. A diamond necklace announces wealth to society. A faded lock of a child's hair belongs to memory. The millionaire's wife may sit beside the youngest child for a few minutes while the nurse gives an account of the day. There was a walk before luncheon. The child ate well. A minor argument occurred over a toy. Someone refused a lesson. Someone else behaved beautifully and has clearly been waiting for this information to reach maternal ears. The mother listens. A child may show her a drawing. Another may recite something memorized during lessons. There is pride in these moments, though also expectation. Children of immense wealth grow up beneath unusual pressure. They are not merely sons and daughters. They are heirs. A boy may someday inherit property, investments, businesses, houses, and a family name that employees and newspapers already recognize. A daughter may become the center of elaborate marriage expectations. Her education, manners, clothing, friendships, and public appearances will be watched closely as she approaches adulthood. The mother begins preparing for this long before the first formal ball. Good posture matters, table manners matter, dancing matters, the ability to make conversation matters. A daughter must know how to enter a room, greet older women, receive introductions, write notes, manage servants, and eventually host dinners of her own. These lessons rarely appear on school examinations. They can determine much of her adult life. Marriage itself is never discussed only as romance within many elite families. Social compatibility, religion, fortune, family reputation, and inheritance all matter. Some wealthy American daughters eventually marry European aristocrats whose titles are impressive but whose estates are financially troubled. Newspapers later call some of these women dollar princesses. Though individual marriages range from affectionate partnerships to deeply unhappy arrangements. For now, those possibilities remain far away. The daughter in the schoolroom is still struggling with a piece of music. A piano stands near one wall. Music forms an important part of elite female education. A young woman who plays well can entertain family and guests, though professional performance is viewed differently from accomplished amateur playing. The same distinction appears in drawing and painting. It is desirable to possess skill. It is less desirable, in some social circles, to appear as though one must earn money from it. Class quietly determines the meaning of talent. The mother may look over a watercolour landscape or listen to several measures played on the piano before praising the effort. Then comes another small ritual of family life. Tea, milk, bread, biscuits, or fruit may be brought for the children depending on household routine. Younger children often eat meals at different times from their parents and may dine in the nursery rather than joining formal evening dinners. This separation protects both worlds. Children avoid the long, elaborate meal downstairs. Adults avoid spilled milk beside the silver centerpiece. There are exceptions. Naturally, older children may join family dinner on certain evenings, particularly when no guests are present, as part of learning proper table behaviour. The nursery staff watches these stages carefully. A nurse who has been with the family for years may know precisely when a child is ready to leave nursery life behind. Such transitions can be emotional. Moving from nurse to governess, from nursery to schoolroom, from home lessons to boarding school, gradually draws a child away from the small domestic world that first contained everything. The mother experiences these changes too, though her role remains different. She approves schools. She interviews tutors. She discusses progress. She may dismiss a governess whose methods she dislikes, or keep a beloved nurse long after the youngest child truly needs one. Servants who care for children occupy an unusual place in wealthy families. They are employees, yet they can become emotionally central. Some children remember nurses more vividly than relatives. The bond can complicate the strict social hierarchy of the mansion. Historians continue to debate how such relationships should be understood, because affection and inequality coexist within them. A nurse may love the child sincerely while still possessing little control over her own working hours or future. As evening deepens, the younger children begin preparing for bed. Their day ends much earlier than their parents will. A basin of warm water may be brought, buttons are undone, hair is brushed. Night clothes replace daytime garments. The curtains are drawn against the darkening windows. Outside, the street sounds have changed. Wheels pass less frequently now, and the first cold brightness of evening lamps lies across the pavement. The millionaire's wife remains for another few minutes. Perhaps she bends to kiss a child good night. Perhaps she listens to a short prayer supervised by the nurse. Religious instruction is still woven naturally into many childhood routines. Bedtime prayers, Bible readings, and moral stories reinforce the belief that character must be shaped alongside education. Then she leaves the nursery. The door closes softly behind her. Downstairs, the mansion belongs once more to adults. Servants are preparing tea and evening clothes. Fires glow more warmly in the drawing rooms. Curtains are being pulled across tall windows one by one. For a brief interval between the children's bedtime and the transformation required for dinner, the house settles into one of its quietest hours. Word count clusters 1, 7, 6, awaiting continue. The nursery door closes behind her, and for a little while the millionaire's wife occupies an hour that belongs neither fully to afternoon nor to evening. The public errands of the day are over. The calls have been made, purchases considered, charitable obligations noted, and children seen before bedtime. Yet the great formal machinery of dinner has not begun for her. Between those two halves of the day lies a quieter interval, usually marked by tea, fading daylight, and the steady transformation of the mansion around her. She may return first to a smaller sitting room rather than the grand drawing room used for guests. Here the furniture is more comfortable. A fire burns steadily in the grate. Curtains are partially drawn against the gathering darkness, and lamps are being lit one by one. If electricity has reached the house, the glow may come from newly installed fixtures, though gas and oil lamps remain common enough that the evening still carries the warm, uneven softness of flame. Tea arrives on a tray. The ritual is less formal than luncheon, but it has its own quiet order. A silver or porcelain pot is set beside cups, saucers, a sugar bowl, and perhaps a small jug of cream or milk. There may be thin slices of bread and butter, biscuits, cakes, or sandwiches. After an afternoon spent moving between houses and shops, the meal is welcome without being heavy. The millionaire's wife removes her gloves. Perhaps her hat has already been taken upstairs by a maid. She pours the tea herself if the gathering is private. In other homes, a servant may assist, but the act of pouring tea is often considered an appropriately feminine duty, even among women who perform almost none of the physical work required to produce the meal. Tea has long since become part of respectable domestic life. By the Gilded Age, the drink reaches American homes through enormous international trading networks. Leaves grown thousands of miles away arrive in carefully packaged tins, eventually becoming something so ordinary that few people at the tea table give much thought to the distance they have travelled. Sugar has its own complicated history. So does porcelain, so does silver. A simple cup of tea therefore gathers together the products of plantations, mines, factories, shipping lines, merchants, and servants before reaching one quiet table beside a fire. No one can quite agree on how closely wealthy American families followed British afternoon tea customs. Some embraced the ritual enthusiastically, others treated tea more casually, and habits varied by region and family background. What remains consistent is the usefulness of the pause itself. The day has been crowded with other people. Tea allows it to contract. If her husband is home early, he might briefly appear before changing for dinner. More often, he may still be at an office, club, business meeting, or travelling across the city. Their daily schedules can overlap surprisingly little despite living beneath the same roof. A secretary may bring in a final note, A servant may announce that flowers have arrived for dinner. A box from the dressmaker might be delivered and sent directly upstairs. The household is entering its evening rhythm. Below stairs, the kitchen has already moved far beyond tea. Stocks simmer, sauces are prepared, fish or meat is trimmed, vegetables are arranged. Desserts may have been underway since morning. The cook gives instructions in a hot room filled with steam and the sharp sounds of knives against boards. Kitchen maids scrub, carry, peel, strain, and fetch. A servant polishes one last serving dish that has somehow escaped attention. Upstairs, everything remains calm. The contrast is essential. Good service is meant to conceal effort. A guest arriving later should never see the hurried preparation behind dinner. The dining room must appear as though the table arranged itself naturally beneath the chandelier. That illusion requires hours. The butler or senior footman checks the placement of glassware and silver. Napkins are folded carefully. Place cards may be arranged if guests are expected. Flowers must be high enough to look impressive, but not so high that they prevent conversation across the table. Candles may be placed in silver candelabra. In houses with electric light, candles sometimes remain because their glow is more flattering and more decorative than the harsher illumination of early bulbs. Lighting itself becomes part of hospitality. Rooms meant for evening entertaining are warmed visually as well as physically. Shades soften lamps. Fireplaces are replenished. Mirrors multiply candlelight. Polished metal and crystal catch tiny points of brightness. Servants move through the mansion closing curtains. One window after another disappears behind velvet or damask. The city outside becomes invisible. Inside, the household turns inward. In winter, this change can be especially comforting. Cold air presses against the glass while carpets, curtains, upholstery, and firelight create an insulated world of warmth. Street sounds become muffled, and snow, if it has fallen, reflects the lamps along the avenue. The millionaire's wife drinks another small cup of tea. For perhaps half an hour, she's not performing for society. She might read a newspaper, though women are sometimes encouraged towards supposedly gentler publications rather than the rougher worlds of politics and finance. Many wealthy women ignore such distinctions completely. Magazines lie on nearby tables. Popular fiction circulates widely. So do travel books, biographies, household journals, fashion publications, and magazines devoted to art or society. Reading can itself become a source of debate. Earlier generations sometimes warned that excessive novels would overstimulate women's imaginations. By the late 19th century, the complaint has hardly vanished. Though women are among the most enthusiastic readers and increasingly important writers of the age, some doctors even connect too much intellectual effort with nervous exhaustion. The diagnosis known as neurasthenia becomes fashionable among affluent Americans, describing symptoms such as fatigue, headaches, insomnia, irritability, and weakness. Treatments can be peculiar. One famous approach, the so-called rest cure, may confine a patient to bed for weeks, discourage reading and writing, and prescribe large quantities of food and massage. Historians continue to debate how often wealthy women underwent the strictest form of such treatment, but its existence reveals how easily ordinary dissatisfaction, or exhaustion, could be interpreted as physical weakness. There are gentler remedies too: chamomile tea, lavender water, warm milk, a quiet room. A little fresh air before sleep. Some women keep small sachets of dried herbs among linens or near pillows, partly for scent and partly because certain fragrances are believed to encourage calm or protect stored fabric from insects. The millionaire's wife may not be thinking about any remedy at all. She's simply tired. The long day has demanded attention at every turn, even when that demand appeared outwardly effortless. A small clock on the mantel approaches the hour when she must change. The maid will soon be waiting upstairs. Tea things are cleared. A servant lifts the tray, and the faint clink of porcelain disappears into the corridor. The drawing-room fire has settled into a deep glow. Outside the windows, darkness is complete now. Carriages occasionally pass, their lamps briefly visible through gaps in the curtains before vanishing again. Somewhere in the house, a bell rings softly to summon a servant. Another answers from farther away. The sounds are small and almost musical within the large rooms. Then the millionaire's wife rises from her chair. The restful interval is ending. Upstairs, evening gowns, corsets, gloves, jewels, combs, hairpins, and perfume awaiting. Below, the dining room is nearing perfection, and between the two, the mansion glows quietly in the last peaceful moments before its evening life begins. Word count 1067. Awaiting continue upstairs. The dressing room has already been prepared. The maid has laid out several pieces of evening clothing in careful order, each one selected because the coming hours require a different level of formality from anything worn earlier in the day. The afternoon gown that survived carriage rides, social calls, shopping, and tea is no longer suitable. Dinner, particularly dinner with guests, demands transformation. The millionaire's wife begins once again with layers. Her daytime clothing is removed piece by piece, hairpins come out, the structured bodice is loosened, skirts are lifted away, and the complicated arrangement beneath them is adjusted or replaced. Depending on the year, the silhouette required for evening may differ subtly from daytime fashion. Although the same corseted foundation remains central, the corset itself may be changed. Evening corsets can be cut lower to accommodate gowns with open necklines. Some are made from silk or satin rather than ordinary couture, decorated with embroidery or ribbon despite being hidden beneath the dress. This hidden decoration tells us something about Gilded Age clothing. Luxury does not always need an audience. A woman may own beautifully made undergarments that almost no one beyond her maid ever sees. Fine stitching, monograms, lace, and coloured ribbons turn even private clothing into evidence of wealth and taste. No one can quite agree on how uncomfortable evening dress truly felt to women accustomed to wearing it. Some memoirs describe restrictive clothing with obvious frustration, while others barely mention it at all. Habits formed from childhood can make extraordinary garments seem ordinary. Still, the process is undeniably elaborate. The evening gown waits nearby. It may be made from silk satin, velvet, brocade, chiffon, lace, or several fabrics combined. The neckline is often lower than daytime clothing permits, and sleeves may be short or nearly absent, leaving shoulders and arms uncovered in a manner considered acceptable after dark but improper during a morning visit. Fashion has its own clock. An exposed shoulder at 11 in the morning might attract criticism. At 11 at night beneath a ballroom chandelier, it may be perfectly respectable. The maid helps lift the gown into place. Hooks and eyes close along the back or side. Tiny fastenings are concealed beneath folds of fabric. Boning inside the bodice keeps everything smooth. A train may extend behind the skirt, long enough to create an elegant line when standing, and troublesome enough to require practice when turning. The train is not simply dragged without thought. Women learn to manage it. A slight movement of the foot can shift fabric out of the way. A hand may briefly gather it when climbing stairs. During dancing, detachable trains or special arrangements sometimes make movement easier. The skill should remain invisible. Like so much of elite life, successful clothing management is supposed to look natural. The maid circles slowly, checking the hem. One side is smoothed, a ribbon is adjusted, a wrinkle is pressed away with careful fingers. Then attention turns again to the hair. The daytime arrangement has loosened slightly after hours beneath a hat. So much of it must be reconstructed. Brushes pass through long strands. Hair is divided, lifted, twisted, and pinned. Depending on fashion, it may be gathered high on the head, arranged into waves around the temples, or formed into a soft knot at the back. False hair may be added. This is not necessarily considered deceptive in the scandalous sense later caricatures suggest. Hairpieces, pads, switches, and additional curls are ordinary tools of fashionable styling. Human hair is traded commercially in considerable quantities. Some comes from women who sell their hair for money. Some is collected from poorer regions of Europe. Dealers sort it by length, texture, and colour before it reaches wig makers and fashionable customers. The origins of such hair are rarely discussed beside the dressing table. Luxury often hides the journey of the materials from which it is made. Once the hair is complete, the maid opens the jewel case. This choice can require almost as much thought as selecting the gown. Diamonds are especially valued in evening light. Gas, candlelight, and later electric chandeliers catch their facets, producing small flashes whenever the wearer turns her head. Pearls offer a softer effect. Sapphires, emeralds, rubies, and other coloured stones may be chosen to complement the fabric. Certain pieces carry family history. A necklace may have belonged to a mother. A brooch might have been given at marriage. A bracelet could mark an anniversary. Jewellery therefore combines wealth, memory, and public display. The most extravagant women of Gilded Age society become famous for possessing enormous collections, and newspapers eagerly describe jewels worn at major balls or opera nights. Some fortunes are so new that expensive jewellery becomes a way of establishing visible permanence. A diamond has no family tree, but it can suggest one if placed in the correct setting. The millionaire's wife may choose a necklace first. The maid fastens it carefully behind her neck. Earrings follow, then bracelets. Perhaps a small jewelled comb is inserted into the hair. A ring remains on one hand from earlier in the day, while another is added for evening. There are superstitions surrounding gemstones too. Opals, for example, acquire an uneven reputation during the 19th century. Some consider them unlucky, though Queen Victoria's fondness for them helps counter the belief. Pearls can symbolise purity, but are also sometimes associated with tears. Such meanings are inconsistent. Historians continue to debate how seriously fashionable women took gemstone superstitions. Because jewellery was often worn despite them whenever taste or fashion demanded. Perfume comes next, scents based on rose, violet, lavender, orange blossom, heliotrope, or more exotic ingredients are popular. Strong fragrance is not always considered tasteful, so a light application may be preferred. A fan is selected. It might seem merely decorative, but a fan has practical value in crowded rooms warmed by fireplaces, gas lights, and dozens of bodies. It also becomes part of social behaviour. Popular culture later exaggerates the idea of an elaborate secret fan language in which every movement carries a romantic message. Some gestures undoubtedly acquire suggestive meanings, but no one can quite agree on whether a standardised code was genuinely used as widely as later books claimed. Mostly, a fan calls the person holding it. It also gives restless hands something graceful to do. Long evening gloves are brought out last. They may extend above the elbow and are often made from fine kid leather. Pale shades are popular, though coloured gloves appear as fashions change. The tiny buttons can once again require a button hook. A maid works patiently along the wrist. The gloves themselves create another etiquette puzzle at dinner. They are removed before eating, sometimes carefully folded or placed across the lap until the meal is finished. Everything depends upon appearing composed. When dressing is complete, the woman studies herself in the tall mirror. The figure reflected there bears little resemblance to the woman who drank tea beside the fire less than an hour ago. Her shoulders are bare. Jewels catch the light. The gown falls in heavy folds toward the carpet. The train rests behind her like a pool of silk. For a moment, the dressing room becomes very still. Beyond the window, the avenue lies dark beneath street lamps. In the hallway, a servant passes without speaking. Far below, the first carriage of the evening may already be approaching the house, its wheels sounding faintly against the street. The maid makes one final adjustment to the necklace. Then a distant bell sounds downstairs. Guests are arriving and the millionaire's wife takes up her fan, draws a slow breath, and leaves the private world of the dressing room for the brighter rooms below, where chandeliers have been lit, silver is waiting, and dinner is about to begin. Word count 1068. Awaiting continue. By the time the millionaire's wife reaches the foot of the staircase, the mansion has completed its transformation. The quiet rooms of afternoon have become a landscape of polished silver, candlelight, crystal, flowers, and carefully placed furniture. Servants move almost noiselessly across carpets. Fires burn steadily behind brass screens. Beyond the windows, the city has disappeared into darkness, leaving only the occasional passing glow of carriage lamps. Guests are already gathering in the drawing room. The hostess receives them with the ease expected of someone who has practiced this ritual many times. A gentleman bows, a woman offers a gloved hand. Names are announced softly by a servant near the entrance. Coats and wraps disappear almost immediately into the care of attendants. Nothing appears hurried. That is the triumph of the evening. Behind the scenes, dinner has required hours of work. In the kitchen, sauces have been watched carefully. Meat roasted, vegetables trimmed, desserts chilled, plates warmed, and serving dishes arranged. Above stairs, however, the impression is one of calm inevitability. Dinner simply seems ready. When the appointed hour arrives, the butler appears at the drawing room doorway and announces that the meal is served. The guests begin moving toward the dining room. Even this movement follows convention. At formal dinners, a gentleman may offer his arm to the woman assigned to him. The host often escorts the most honoured female guest, while the hostess enters with a gentleman whose social rank or importance makes him an appropriate partner. Seating has been planned long before anyone arrived. The arrangement is rarely accidental. A hostess considers rank, age, personality, friendship, possible rivalries, and conversational ability. Husbands and wives are often seated apart, so they will speak with other guests rather than retreat into familiar conversation. A poor seating plan can flatten an evening. A clever one can make 12 strangers feel, at least for 2 hours, as though they have always known one another. No one can quite agree on how rigidly every household obeyed European rules of precedence, especially in an American society that liked to claim it had escaped aristocratic hierarchy. In practice, wealth, reputation, age, public office, and family standing all influenced where people sat. America may have rejected hereditary titles. It did not reject social calculation. The dining room doors open. A long table waits beneath a chandelier. Its white linen is nearly hidden beneath flowers, silver, porcelain, and glassware. At especially extravagant dinners, orchids, roses, lilies, or seasonal arrangements may run nearly the length of the table. Decorative objects, silver figurines, or elaborate centerpieces can occupy the spaces between them. The most ambitious hosts create temporary fantasies. A table might resemble a woodland garden. Another might display miniature fountains or mirrored surfaces suggesting water. At great banquets, flowers can be imported at considerable cost simply to bloom for one evening and disappear the following morning. Yet the flowers must not prevent conversation. Etiquette advisors repeatedly warn against centerpieces so tall that diners cannot see one another, proof that at least some hostesses occasionally prefer spectacle to practicality. The millionaire's wife takes her place. A servant pulls back the chair. Her train is arranged discreetly so it does not catch beneath the furniture. Gloves are removed. A folded napkin rests across her lap. Before her lies an impressive landscape of utensils. Forks sit to one side, knives and spoons to the other. Several glasses wait above the plate, each intended for a different wine or beverage. A small bread plate may sit nearby. The arrangement can look intimidating to anyone unfamiliar with formal dining, but to these guests the sequence is learned habit. The outside utensils are generally used first. Course by course, the place setting gradually becomes simpler. Dinner may begin with oysters or another light opening dish, followed by soup, fish, an entree, roast meat, vegetable, salad, game, sweets, cheese, fruit, and coffee. The exact order varies with fashion and household preference, and not every dinner includes every possible course. Some menus become remarkably long. A wealthy hostess may believe abundance demonstrates generosity. Her guests may privately wonder how anyone is expected to remain awake through it. The observation is rarely spoken aloud. Service itself is changing during the Gilded Age. Older forms of dining sometimes place several dishes on the table at once, allowing guests or servants to help distribute them. Increasingly fashionable service à la Russe presents courses sequentially, with servants carrying each dish around the table. This creates greater ceremony. It also keeps hot food warmer and allows the table to remain visually uncluttered. The footmen perform a slow choreography. One approaches with a serving dish, another handles wine, another removes finished plates. The butler supervises quietly, noticing everything without appearing to watch anything. The millionaire's wife must do something similar. As hostess, she eats, while also monitoring the room. Is the guest beside the elderly widow speaking enough? Has the senator become trapped in an argument? Is one gentleman monopolizing conversation? Has a servant missed a place? Does anyone require assistance? The best hostess corrects problems without making them visible. Conversation passes across the table. Politics may appear, though not too aggressively. So may travel. Europe is always useful. Someone has recently returned from Paris. Another family is preparing to spend summer in Newport. A gentleman describes a railroad journey west. A woman comments on a new exhibition at a museum. There may be discussion of music, architecture, horses, books, or a forthcoming wedding. Business is more complicated. Men sometimes discuss investments or corporate affairs despite etiquette, advice discouraging shop talk at formal dinner. Their wives may understand far more than social convention assumes. Many wealthy women know exactly where family fortunes originate. They may follow investments, inherit property, own securities, or discuss finances privately with lawyers and bankers. Yet at the table, the appearance of effortless distance from commerce often remains fashionable. Money should be visible everywhere. It simply should not always be mentioned. The food itself provides evidence enough. Fresh fruit in winter can be expensive. Imported delicacies demonstrate access to distant markets. Champagne arrives from France. Fine wines emerge from carefully maintained cellars. Oysters travel packed in ice. Game may come from country estates or specialized suppliers. The menu is therefore a map of transportation networks that have made the Gilded Age possible. Railroads move food quickly. Steamships shorten ocean crossings. Ice keeps perishables from spoiling. Telegraphs help merchants coordinate supply. A single elegant dinner depends upon an industrial world extending far beyond the mansion walls. One curious object may appear between courses, the individual salt cellar. Before modern salt shakers become universal, diners may take small amounts of salt from tiny open dishes using miniature salt spoons. These objects can be beautifully made from silver, glass, or porcelain. Finger bowls may return near the meal's end. A guest lightly touches fingertips to the water and dries them on the napkin. Again, the ritual requires no explanation. Its purpose is almost less important than knowing when to perform it. As the courses progress, candles burn lower. The flowers release more fragrance into the warm room. Conversation becomes easier after the initial formality has passed. For the hostess, this is the moment when preparation begins to justify itself. Guests are speaking across social boundaries she deliberately arranged. A charitable project may gain a donor before dessert. A young woman may be introduced to someone who will become important in her future. A business relationship may begin casually between two men who were seated together because their wives thought they might get along. Dinner is private entertainment. It is also social infrastructure. Toward the end, dessert appears in decorative forms, molded creams, pastries, fruit, ices, perhaps chocolates arranged on small dishes. Coffee follows. In some households, women withdraw to the drawing room while men remain briefly with cigars, port, or brandy. The old custom is beginning to loosen by the end of the century, but it remains common enough in formal entertaining. The millionaire's wife rises. The other women follow. Silk skirts whisper across the carpet as they leave the dining room. Behind them, servants begin the quiet work of clearing plates and glasses. The drawing room awaits with softer chairs and lower light. For a little while, the women speak without the men. Then footsteps approach from the hallway. The evening is not ending. For many of these guests, dinner has merely prepared them for whatever comes afterward. Music, theatre, opera, a reception, or one of the great glittering balls that can continue until the city beyond the mansion has almost reached morning. Word count 1, 72, awaiting continue. After dinner, the mansion does not settle immediately into quiet. For many wealthy families, the evening has only reached its most visible hours. Carriages are called again, wraps are brought from cloakrooms, gloves are checked, jewels adjusted, and the carefully constructed evening appearance must now survive another journey through cold streets toward an opera house, theatre, reception, private music hall, or ballroom. The millionaire's wife may have been awake for more than 12 hours already, yet society expects freshness. A maid may briefly repair her hair before departure. A loose pin is replaced. Powder is touched lightly to the face. A cloak lined with fur or heavy silk is placed around her shoulders, protecting the fragile evening gown from winter air. The train of the dress requires attention while entering the carriage. A servant gathers it carefully. Then the door closes, and the horses move away. Beyond the carriage windows, the city is transformed. Daytime deliveries have thinned. Shop windows glow under gas or electric light. Hotel entrances remain bright. Theatre districts draw clusters of vehicles toward their doors. Policemen direct traffic at busy intersections, while coachmen call to one another through the cold. The richest sections of the city seem almost theatrical after dark. Street lamps reflect on wet pavement. Steam rises faintly from horses. Carriage lamps move like small drifting stars between buildings. Inside the carriage, the millionaire's wife sits almost motionless to protect the gown. Beside her may be her husband, a daughter, a friend, or another guest. Conversation is quieter now. Everyone knows the real performance of the evening may begin before the curtain rises. At the opera, being seen can matter almost as much as seeing. Private boxes become stages of their own. Families lease or purchase them for the season, and the location of a box can signal social position with extraordinary clarity. The audience below may look toward the stage, but many eyes also travel upward toward the tiers where famous families sit beneath gilded ornament and velvet drapery. The millionaire's wife enters through a lobby filled with polished marble, mirrors, uniforms, perfume, and movement. Servants take her cloak. The jewels hidden beneath it suddenly catch the light. She moves slowly toward the family box. An opera glass may hang from a ribbon or chain. These small binoculars are practical for viewing the stage, but they are equally useful for surveying the audience. A slight lift of the glasses allows a woman to inspect a distant box without turning her whole body. Who has arrived? Who is wearing a new necklace? Which daughter has appeared publicly for the first time? Who is absent? And perhaps most importantly, who is sitting with whom? The opera glass becomes a quiet instrument of social observation. One need not stare openly when technology can provide discretion. The box itself may contain several chairs arranged so the occupants remain visible to the house. Some women sit farther forward deliberately. Others withdraw slightly when they wish to avoid attention. No one can quite agree on how much conversation actually occurred during performances in the most fashionable opera houses. Contemporary complaints suggest that at least some audiences talked freely enough to irritate people who had come primarily for the music. Etiquette manuals recommend restraint. Human behavior is less obedient. Between acts, however, conversation is expected. Visitors may appear at the box door. A gentleman calls briefly. A relative introduces an acquaintance. Someone brings news from another section of the theatre. The millionaire's wife receives these visitors much as she received callers in her drawing room earlier in the day, though now the atmosphere is brighter, louder, and more public. A box invitation can carry considerable social meaning. To be welcomed there suggests acceptance. To be repeatedly excluded can say something else. Young unmarried women are watched particularly closely. Their gowns, companions, behaviour, and apparent admirers may all attract comment. A mother seated beside a daughter understands that the opera is part entertainment and part introduction to society. Marriage possibilities move quietly through such rooms. A young man may be invited to visit the box during an interval. His family background is already known. His fortune may be known too, even if nobody mentions it. Respectability requires pretending that romance alone guides the future. Practical considerations rarely disappear so completely. After the final curtain, the evening might still continue. Some families return home. Others go on to a reception or ball. A grand ballroom offers another kind of ritualized display. Carriages queue outside the entrance. Servants open doors. Guests climb a staircase bordered by flowers and perhaps temporary decorations created for a single night. Inside, musicians wait on a raised platform while chandeliers illuminate polished floors. At especially extravagant Gilded Age balls, hostesses spend enormous sums transforming rooms into artificial gardens, exotic landscapes, or historical fantasies. Flowers cover walls, palms fill corners, temporary fountains may be installed, ice sculptures appear at supper tables. Entire conservatories seem to bloom indoors during winter. The effect lasts only a few hours. By morning, much of it is dismantled. Such impermanence is part of the display. Only extraordinary wealth can spend so much creating something meant to vanish before noon. The millionaire's wife understands how to move through this environment. She greets the hostess. She acknowledges acquaintances. She keeps track of her husband and children without appearing to monitor them. If she is the mother of a daughter in society, she may watch the dance floor carefully. Dance cards can play a role in these evenings. A young woman may carry a small decorated booklet listing dances, with names of partners written beside them. The card might hang from a ribbon at the wrist and include a tiny pencil. The object looks charming. Its function is practical. It prevents confusion when several gentlemen have requested dances in advance. A young woman with every dance filled is considered fortunate. An empty card may cause quiet anxiety. The mother notices. Of course she notices. Waltzes have long since become respectable in elite society, although earlier generations once regarded close-partnered dancing with suspicion. By the Gilded Age, the waltz, polka, quadrille, and other dances belong comfortably to fashionable entertainment. Even so, dance etiquette remains precise. A gentleman asks, a woman may accept or decline. Introductions matter. Partners return women to their chaperones or companions. The dance floor appears spontaneous only because everyone knows the basic rules. The millionaire's wife may dance less frequently than younger guests. Instead, she converses. She moves between familiar groups, discusses summer plans, remembers an upcoming benefit, congratulates someone on an engagement, and notices which families are growing closer. A ballroom is another map. People reveal alliances simply by where they stand. Near midnight, supper may be served. Tables offer cold meats, salads, oysters, pastries, fruit, champagne, ices, and coffee. At the largest events, guests circulate through supper rooms in waves while servants continually replace dishes. It can be difficult to imagine eating again only hours after a multi-course dinner, yet these evenings often continue until very late. Food becomes fuel for endurance. Around 2 a.m, the atmosphere changes subtly. Some older guests have gone home. Flowers begin to droop slightly in overheated rooms. Candles burn lower where candles are still used. Musicians have repeated familiar dances for hours. The millionaire's wife may begin to feel the weight of the jewellery at her throat and the pressure of shoes that were elegant at 8 o'clock and much less persuasive at 2. Outside, the city is quieter now. When she finally leaves, the night air feels startlingly cool. A servant wraps the cloak around her shoulders. The carriage waits beneath a dark sky. Hooves begin their slow rhythm home. Through the glass, the streets seem almost empty. Storefronts are dark. A few lamps still burn in hotels and clubs. Somewhere a night watchman passes beneath a street lamp. The glittering social world contracts behind her. By the time the carriage turns toward the family mansion, even the busiest avenues have begun to resemble sleeping streets. And within the upholstered darkness of the carriage, the millionaire's wife can finally stop smiling for a few quiet minutes, while distant wheels, faint bells, and the steady motion of horses carry her toward the last hours of a remarkably long day. Word count 1, Siast Route 74, waiting continue. The carriage returns to the mansion long after the drawing rooms have grown quiet. A servant opens the door, and the millionaire's wife steps down carefully, gathering the heavy folds of her evening gown while the cold night air lingers around the entrance. Somewhere behind her, the horses breathe softly in the darkness. Ahead, the front hall glows beneath lamps that have been left burning for the family's return. The house appears peaceful. Yet the woman entering it may feel something very different from peace. A day that seemed, from the outside, to contain only comfort has required almost continuous attention. She has dressed twice with the help of a maid, reviewed household matters, answered correspondence, made formal calls, visited shops, attended a luncheon, perhaps served on a charitable committee, spent time with her children, prepared for dinner, received guests, and continued through opera or a ball long after midnight. Nothing in the day has resembled physical labour as servants experience it, but very little has been entirely free. This is one of the quieter contradictions of Gilded Age wealth. The millionaire's wife possesses privileges almost unimaginable to the people who cook her meals, polish her silver, wash her clothes, and tend her horses. She may own several houses, travel to Europe, wear diamonds, attend the finest theatres, and spend summers in enormous seaside cottages. Yet her life is surrounded by rules. Appearance must be maintained, friendships must be managed, children must be positioned carefully within society. A husband's reputation can affect her own. A daughter's mistake can become a family embarrassment. A badly judged dinner invitation may linger in drawing-room conversation for weeks. The boundaries are not prison walls. They are softer than that. They are made of expectation, and expectations can be surprisingly difficult to escape. Upstairs, the maid waits in the dressing room, the door closes behind them, and the elaborate evening identity begins to come apart. First the cloak, then the gloves. Jewellery is removed piece by piece. A necklace that flashed brilliantly beneath the opera lights is returned to velvet. Earrings are unclasped. Bracelets disappear into compartments. Rings are placed carefully in a box or tray. The maid counts valuable pieces before storing them. Jewellery can be insured, locked in safes, or entrusted to servants, but theft remains a persistent concern in wealthy households. Newspapers delight in stories of missing diamonds, dishonest employees, mysterious burglaries, and jewels lost during travel. Some families hide valuables in unexpected places. Others install increasingly sophisticated safes. No one can quite agree on how common servant theft actually was compared with how often employers suspected it. Domestic workers occupied an uncomfortable position close enough to witness extraordinary wealth, but socially excluded from it. Suspicion could fall quickly. For the woman before the mirror, however, the jewels are simply becoming heavier memories of the evening. The gown comes next, hooks are opened, the fitted bodice loosens, the train is lifted from the floor. A small stain may be noticed near the hem where the fabric touched a carriage step or ballroom floor. That will become someone else's work tomorrow. A maid will brush the fabric, treat the stain, inspect seams, and perhaps send the gown for professional cleaning if necessary. Even luxury requires maintenance. The corset is loosened. The relief can be immediate. Some women describe the sensation in memoirs and letters, while others hardly mention it. Historians continue to debate how oppressive fashionable dress felt to women who had worn structured clothing from adolescence. Still, after so many hours, removing it must have marked a distinct transition. Hair follows, one pin after another is withdrawn. The elaborate arrangement collapses slowly. False pieces are removed if they have been used. Long natural hair falls across the woman's shoulders and back. The maid brushes through it carefully, perhaps counting strokes according to a familiar beauty custom that recommends prolonged brushing for shine and scalp health. The famous idea of 100 brush strokes before bed appears repeatedly in later popular culture, though no one can quite agree on how widely women actually followed such a precise number. The principle, however, is familiar. Brushing distributes natural oils and removes dust from hair that is not necessarily washed every day. Her face may be cleaned with cold cream. A soft cloth wipes away powder and the faint residue of the city. Perfume fades. The public woman disappears by degrees, and in the mirror there remains simply a tired person. The cost of fashionable life is not only exhaustion. Marriage can impose deeper limitations. A millionaire's wife may live in extraordinary comfort while having relatively little control over the fortune creating that comfort. Married women's property laws improved considerably during the 19th century, and some wealthier women possess substantial inheritances or investments in their own names. But legal rights do not automatically produce independence. Family trusts, marriage settlements, social customs, and husband's financial authority can shape what a woman may spend or control. Some wives receive generous allowances. Others discover that enormous household wealth does not mean personal freedom. A husband may maintain separate rooms, travel constantly, or spend long periods at clubs and offices. Some marriages are affectionate partnerships. Others exist largely as social arrangements. Divorce remains possible, but carries serious stigma, especially for women in elite society. A wife unhappy in marriage may therefore remain inside it because leaving could damage her social position, access to children, financial security, and family reputation. Those who recorded these lives never fully agreed on how many wealthy marriages were quietly miserable. Public records show ceremonies. Newspapers show dinners and jewels. Private loneliness leaves fewer documents. There are hints in diaries, long trips abroad taken without husbands, periods of unexplained illness. Letters describing boredom, an intense attachment to children, sisters, female friends, religion, or charitable work. Doctors sometimes interpret emotional strain as nervous weakness. The fashionable diagnosis of neurasthenia can become a language through which exhaustion is described without challenging the social structure surrounding it. Treatment may involve rest, travel, mineral springs, special diets, massage, electrical therapies, or long stays at health resorts. The millionaire's wife has access to the best medical care money can purchase. Unfortunately, the best medical care of the period is not always especially effective. A woman complaining of insomnia might receive bromides or chloral hydrate. For pain, physicians may prescribe opiates. Patent medicines can contain alcohol, cocaine derivatives, or other substances that are poorly regulated by modern standards. Some remedies soothe. Some create entirely new problems. The wealthy are not protected from medical uncertainty, nor are they protected from grief. A fine nursery does not guarantee a child will survive infection. A mansion does not keep pneumonia outside. Money can summon physicians quickly, improve nutrition, provide cleaner rooms, and allow recovery away from polluted cities, but death still crosses expensive carpets. Perhaps this is why mourning customs remain so visible even among the very rich. Black gowns, jet jewellery, curtains partly drawn, social calendars abandoned, stationery edged in black. In some households, mirrors are covered after a death, a custom more strongly associated with certain religious and folk traditions than with elite etiquette everywhere. Others stop clocks at the moment of death or preserve locks of hair as remembrance. Whether these practices are taken literally or symbolically, they reveal how uncertain life remains beneath material abundance. The millionaire's wife may understand this better than outsiders imagine. Her social world is filled with widows. Some inherit fortunes and become surprisingly independent. Others spend years wearing black while managing estates, children, servants, and expectations alone. The glamorous evening therefore exists beside another reality. Time is passing. Beauty is watched closely. Youth has social value. A woman growing older may gradually move from being observed for her appearance to being respected for her influence, particularly if she controls money or becomes the senior figure within a family. That transition can bring freedom. It can also bring invisibility. By now the mansion is nearly silent. The younger children have been asleep for hours. The kitchen has been cleaned. Most servants have withdrawn to their rooms, though someone remains awake in case the family requires assistance. A few coals glow behind the bedroom grate. Outside, rain begins lightly against the glass. The millionaire's wife settles into a chair while her maid folds away the last garment. For the first time since morning, there is no invitation waiting to be answered immediately. No guest to receive. No dinner conversation to sustain. No opera box across the room studying her gown. The silence reveals what the glitter can hide. Wealth has made her life comfortable beyond measure. It has also made her visible, and visibility has its own demands. The maid wishes her good night and withdraws. The door closes softly. Rain continues against the windows. Far beyond the mansion, the city is sleeping unevenly, servants in narrow rooms, factory workers preparing for early shifts, families crowded into tenements, and wealthy households settling behind stone facades. For a few quiet hours, all of them disappear into darkness. The millionaire's wife lies beneath fine linen, surrounded by objects chosen with extraordinary care, while the last firelight fades against the walls. Tomorrow, the entire performance will begin again, but tonight, at least, the jewels are locked away, the invitations are silent, and the house asks nothing more of her. Word count 074, awaiting continue. The rain continues softly against the bedroom windows, and the mansion settles deeper into the hour when even wealth loses much of its brightness. The jewels have been locked away. The evening gown hangs beyond sight, waiting for someone to inspect it in daylight. Gloves rest folded on a dressing table. Hairpins lie together in a small tray. The fire has fallen low enough that the room is illuminated more by the shaded bedside lamp than by the fading red coals in the grate. For the millionaire's wife, the day is finally ending. Yet elsewhere in the mansion, a few people are still awake. A servant crosses the lower hallway carrying a lamp. The great staircase that seemed so impressive beneath the evening chandeliers now stands mostly in darkness. Paintings disappear into shadow. Mirrors hold only faint reflections. The flowers arranged for dinner remain in their vases, though several blossoms have begun to bend slightly after hours in warm rooms. The dining room has been restored to order. Glasses have been washed or left carefully arranged for morning attention. Silver has been counted. Table linens have been removed. Remaining food has been stored, reused where practical, or distributed according to household custom. Waste certainly exists in rich houses, sometimes extravagantly so, but not everything is simply thrown away. Servants may eat leftovers from family meals, though exactly which foods reach the servant's table depends upon the household. Good meat, bread, vegetables, and desserts might appear downstairs after an elaborate dinner, while other households maintain stricter separation between food prepared for the family and food intended for staff. No one can quite agree on how generous the leftovers of wealthy households really were. Domestic memoirs reveal employers ranging from thoughtful to astonishingly stingy. Tonight, however, the kitchen is nearly silent. The large range cools slowly. A kettle sits empty. Copper pans hang against the wall. The smell of roasted meat, Coffee, soap, and dying coal remains faintly in the air. One kitchen maid may have already climbed to a small attic bedroom. Another servant finishes the last task before doing the same. Their rest will be shorter than the family's. Morning work begins early. That difference is built into the house itself. The millionaire's wife sleeps because others prepare the conditions in which she can sleep undisturbed. A chambermaid will wake before her. The cook will begin breakfast. Fires will be attended. Deliveries will arrive. The carriage horses will be fed. A housemaid will sweep dust that's settled while everyone slept. And so the mansion contains two different clocks. One belongs to the family, the other belongs to the people who make the family's schedule possible. For now, both clocks have slowed. In the bedroom, the millionaire's wife may read for a few minutes. Perhaps she opens a novel and discovers that she has reached the same paragraph 3 times without remembering it. The body has its own opinion about when a long social evening should end. A glass of water sits beside the bed. Some women prefer warm milk, herbal tea, or another mild nighttime drink. Others rely on physician-prescribed sleeping preparations when insomnia becomes persistent. Late 19th century medicine offers remedies that modern physicians would use far more cautiously. Bromide compounds are widely prescribed for nervousness and sleeplessness. Chloral hydrate can also be used as a sedative. Laudanum and other opiate preparations remain available for pain and various complaints. The boundary between medicine and dependency is poorly understood. Historians continue to debate how widespread habitual sedative use became among affluent women, because prescriptions were private and records incomplete. Simpler remedies coexist with the medical ones. A warm bath, lavender tucked among bed linen, a hot water bottle, extra blankets, an open window when fresh air is believed beneficial, or perhaps simply darkness. The millionaire's wife closes her book. The lamp is lowered. Outside, a final carriage passes along the avenue. Its wheels produce a distant wet rhythm and then fade. The city does not truly sleep. Of course. Somewhere bakers are beginning work before dawn. Newspaper presses run through the night. Railway employees move freight beneath station lamps. Policemen walk their routes. Nurses watch patients. Stable workers tend horses. Factory furnaces glow behind dark walls. But from the upper windows of the mansion, those lives are difficult to see. The street appears almost empty. Rain glimmers beneath lamps. Rows of houses stand with curtains drawn. The great wealth displayed during daylight has disappeared behind stone and brick. Within those walls, families sleep under very different circumstances, yet night makes their windows look strangely alike. A light burns, then it goes out. Another remains for a while. Then darkness takes that one too. The millionaire's wife settles beneath linen sheets and wool blankets. The bed may contain a mattress stuffed with hair, cotton, or other materials considered suitable for expensive bedding. Springs have become increasingly common, and manufacturers advertise ever more elaborate systems promising comfort and healthy sleep. Even mattresses become part of modern consumption, yet sleep remains stubbornly ancient. No amount of money can command it instantly. She lies still while the last movements of the household fade. There is a door closing somewhere below. A step on the staircase, a faint metallic click as someone checks a lock. Security is taken seriously in wealthy homes. Doors and windows are inspected. Valuable rooms may be secured. Some houses employ night watchmen, guards, or servants expected to remain alert when important guests or expensive collections are present. There are also small domestic superstitions carried quietly through generations. Some people avoid placing a bed directly beneath a heavy beam. Others believe particular dreams foretell illness, visitors, weddings, or death. Dream books circulate widely, offering interpretations for everything from water to birds to teeth. No one can quite agree on how seriously affluent Americans believe these guides. A woman might laugh at such superstition in daylight and still feel uneasy after an especially vivid dream. Human beings are rarely perfectly rational at 2 a.m, but no troubling dream has arrived yet. There is only rain, only the dying fire, only the soft weight of blankets. Tomorrow there may be another luncheon, another fitting, another committee meeting. Perhaps guests will arrive from Boston. Perhaps a daughter needs a dancing lesson. Perhaps the housekeeper will report that a servant has resigned unexpectedly. Perhaps the florist will send the wrong roses. The machinery of privilege will begin turning again. but those concerns belong to daylight. For now, the mansion is quiet enough that time itself seems to have loosened. Years will pass through rooms like these. Children will grow, daughters will marry, sons will inherit, servants will leave and be replaced by names the family has not yet heard. Carriages will gradually surrender the streets to automobiles. Gaslight will give way more completely to electricity. The great houses themselves will face uncertain futures. Some will remain in families for generations. Others will be sold, some will become museums, schools, clubs, or institutions. Many will simply vanish beneath the changing city, their stone facades demolished and their rooms remembered only in photographs. The woman sleeping inside one of them cannot know which future belongs to her home. She knows only the world immediately around her, a familiar bedroom, a quiet corridor, the faint scent of extinguished candles, rain moving gently beyond thick curtains, and somewhere, perhaps from a distant church tower, a bell marking an hour that very few people are awake to hear. Its sound travels through wet darkness and fades between the buildings. Another generation will someday hear another bell. Another family will watch another evening disappear. Objects will survive longer than the hands that held them: a silver brush, a calling card, a faded gown, a photograph tucked inside an album, a small lock of hair, perhaps a necklace resting quietly in a museum case. The woman herself will become part of history. Not merely a figure beneath diamonds, and not simply the idle wife imagined by people looking backward at enormous fortunes, but a person who lived within a complicated arrangement of privilege, expectation, dependence, influence, comfort, and obligation. The fire gives one final glow, then it dims, the rain softens, the mansion becomes almost entirely dark, and the long Gilded Age day finally disappears into sleep. The streets beyond the curtains grow quiet. The horses in distant stables stand beneath warm blankets, and the last lamps in neighbouring houses fade one by one. Morning will come eventually, bringing trays, letters, footsteps, polished silver, carriage wheels, and all the carefully arranged routines of another day. But there is no need to follow them there. For tonight, the doors can remain closed. The flowers may rest in their vases. The unanswered invitations can wait upon the writing table. The clocks may continue softly without being watched. And the mansion, so full of movement only hours before, can simply remain still beneath the darkness. The firelight fades. The distant city becomes quieter. Time moves onward, gently and without hurry, carrying mansions, fortunes, fashions, families, servants, and generations into memory. And somewhere beyond that fading world, there is only the calm rhythm of night, the soft shelter of blankets, and the peaceful knowledge that nothing more is required before sleep.